The story begins with an introduction to an unemployed young man named Mutta. It was revealed that Mutta lost his job after accidentally punching his boss in front of all the employees. As a result, he was fired on the spot. Not only Mutta was dismissed, but his name was also blacklisted by many companies. They argued that aside from his poor track record, Mutta was only a vocational school graduate. Despite his repeated attempts to convince various employers, Mutta couldn't secure a job. That was until one day, his younger brother called him with an unexpected job offer. His brother, Hibito, is Mutta's twin, though the two haven't seen each other in years. Currently, Hibito works at NASA. During the call, Hibito offered Mutta a job opportunity, but Mutta refused, feeling that getting a job through connections was unethical. Hibito, however, didn't give up. He reminded Mutta of the shared dream they once had as children. Hibito hoped this would reignite Mutta's passion and remind him of their long-forgotten aspirations. Unexpectedly, the call stirred a childhood memory in Mutta. Back then, Mutta and Hibito were inseparable. They would play together for hours, often ignoring their mother's calls to come home, staying out until nightfall. But their nighttime activities were different from other kids. They were fascinated by the night sky. Not only that, the two even claimed to have seen a UFO once. Their love for the stars and outer space was boundless. Mutta and Hibito frequently visited space museums and even saved up to buy an expensive telescope together. Recalling this, Mutta felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized his dream wasn't over. The next morning, he applied for a position at the Japanese Space Agency. During the interview, Mutta shared his past experiences. Though he had been fired unintentionally, he was determined to prove that, fueled by a childhood dream, he could become an exceptional astronaut. At one moment, one of the executives asked if Hibito was indeed his brother. Hesitantly, Mutta confirmed it, feeling a tinge of embarrassment at having a younger brother who was far more successful. Unfortunately, his interview time ran out. However, one executive named Tadashi noticed something remarkable about Mutta. Throughout the interview, Mutta had been subtly fixing the chair he was sitting on, showing a keen eye for detail and a hands-on attitude. This small act made Tadashi believe that Mutta wasn't as unremarkable as he seemed. As a result, Mutta passed the interview stage with surprising ease. Though Mutta suspected Hibito might have had a hand in his success, he decided to focus on the challenges ahead. He resolved to face the upcoming selection process with even greater determination. After completing the initial selection, Mutta walked out of the building, feeling a wave of relief. He allowed himself to imagine a future where he had truly achieved his dream. However, his presence didn't go unnoticed. Many began to whisper, speculating that Mutta had only gotten this far because of his brother's influence. Before Mutta could defend himself, a man named Hiroshi stepped in to mediate. Hiroshi calmly explained that not everyone had ill intentions. He firmly believed that Mutta wouldn't resort to underhanded tactics. Hiroshi's defense lifted Mutta's spirits, and the two quickly became friends. The following day, Hibito contacted Mutta to ask about the selection process from the day before. With confidence, Mutta explained that the test had been incredibly challenging, but he had given it his all. After their conversation, Hibito invited his older brother to come to America for a farewell gathering before he left for the moon. Without hesitation, Mutta made the trip. Once arrived, Mutta confessed that he still had some doubts about the tests he had undergone. Hibito responded by saying that Mutta had changed. The Mutta he knew was someone who had always been full of energy and optimism about his dreams. Hibito went on to explain that all his achievements were thanks to Mutta. But Mutta quickly interrupted, acknowledging that he had once dreamed just as big. However, he asked Hibito if he realized how long ago that was. Apparently, Mutta had buried those dreams deep, partly because of the ridicule he faced from others, including their old schoolmates. For now, Mutta didn't want to set his hopes too high, fearing the pain of failure. But when Hibito left him alone, Mutta stumbled upon a letter. It was a will of sorts, written by Hibito. Inside the will, Hibito expressed his deepest wish, to one day set foot on the moon alongside Mutta. But if Hibito failed this time, he hoped Mutta would carry on their dream. Those words began to chip away at the doubts that had long plagued Mutta's heart. Once again, It was Hibito who reignited Muta's fading spirit. Not long after, the day of Hibito's departure finally arrived. At the launch site, Hibito thanked his family for being there. The crowd cheered his name, and Hibito turned to Muta, telling him that one day, Muta would stand in the same place. Unexpectedly, Hibito's pet dog slipped away unnoticed. Fortunately, Muta managed to find it. As he returned, an elderly man approached and invited Muta to watch the launch. At that moment, Muta was awestruck by the sight before him. The old man remarked that what Muta was feeling might be the same passion he had felt in his youth. He shared that he, too, had once dreamed of going to space. Looking at Muta, the old man added that Muta should never give up on his dream, or he'll regret it for the rest of his life. The next day, Hibito's moon landing was broadcast live across all Japanese TV stations. The joy felt by the Japanese people was shared by Muta, who had just learned he had passed the final selection test. Now Muta was just one step away from joining Hibito. Along with 5 other candidates, Muta would undergo a rigorous quarantine. They would be given tasks simulating the responsibilities of astronauts, and their every move would be monitored by CCTV. Additionally, they were required to wear a wristband at all times, which tracked their psychological condition. Not long after, the first day of quarantine began. At first, Muta thought it would be easy, but he was wrong. They were given only 3 minutes to eat each meal, and every day brought new, grueling challenges. Yet, with the renewed ambition and determination burning inside him, Muta vowed never to give up on his dream again. Days passed, filled with one test after another. On the 8th day, the group was divided into 2 teams. Each team was tasked with designing a mock project they might undertake if they reached the moon. During the presentation to the supervisors, Tadashi asked Muta which candidates he believed were worthy of becoming astronauts. At that moment, Muta carefully outlined the strengths and weaknesses of each individual. But he added that everyone there shared the same unwavering determination. Impressed, Tadashi entrusted Muta with a secret mission and handed him a green card, emphasizing that its contents must remain confidential. Unexpectedly, Muta was given the task of sabotaging everyone's projects. After reading the instructions, Muta became confused, asking why he was asked to do this. In the midst of his confusion, another question emerged. Was the task to ensure he didn't pass the selection, or was there another motive behind the supervisor's order? Sure enough, the next morning, one of Muta's teammates, Furuya, discovered that their hard work had been ruined. Furuya immediately accused Yamato, a candidate from the other team, of being the culprit. This suspicion stemmed from Yamato's individualistic behavior since the beginning. Watching the argument unfold, Muta remained silent, but the guilt weighed heavily on him. That night, he struggled to sleep, haunted by his conscience. Yet, what could he do was waiting for another order from the supervisors. The next morning, Hiroshi approached Muta. Hiroshi, the most brilliant mind in the group, had begun to suspect Muta was behind the sabotage. But before the conversation could go further, Yamato arrived, announcing that his team's project had also been destroyed. At that moment, a heated argument erupted in the quarantine room, with Yamato blaming Furuya, claiming Furuya had been the most emotional when their project was ruined the day before. Once again, Muta stayed silent, unsure of what to do. With only 1 day left, the candidates scrambled to repair their damaged projects. But then, Muta was summoned by the supervisors. There, Tadashi delivered devastating news. Hibito had been involved in an accident on the moon, and the team was currently investigating to locate him. Hearing this, Muta was left speechless. It felt as though all his efforts had been in vain. The promise he had worked so hard to keep was slipping away. Shortly after, Muta returned to the room with a hollow expression. Every step felt empty, his mind unable to focus on anything but the crushing weight of the news. Eventually, he could no longer bear the guilt of the role he had played in the sabotage. He decided to confess. However, Hiroshi, who had figured out that Muta was acting under orders, tried to stop him. Surprisingly, Muta instead began to share a story. He recounted how, as a child, he and Hibito had seen a UFO together. That moment had sparked a dream in him, a dream he had carried with him all these years. Time and time again, Mutta had wanted to give up, but Hibito had always been there to encourage him. Because of this, no matter what happened, Mutta was determined to see his dream through. Unexpectedly, his story began to inspire the others. A woman named Ito shared that she was there to honor her late father. One by one, the others opened up about their own reasons for pursuing this path. Unintentionally, their shared vulnerability brought them closer together. The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. Anger gave way to understanding, and reluctant hearts softened, filling with a newfound sense of joy and connection. The events that unfolded left the supervisors in awe. Despite being under immense pressure and grappling with profound grief, Mutta had managed to create an atmosphere of calm and warmth among his peers. Meanwhile, it was revealed that Hibito was still alive. However, his condition was dire. With an injured leg, Hibito struggled to climb out of a lunar valley before the sun disappeared, leaving him in the moon's freezing darkness. Despite this, he kept pushing forward, driven by the promise he had made to Mutta. A few days later, Mutta's quarantine period came to an end. He was invited to his final interview session. At that moment, Tadashi asked Mutta if he was afraid of death. For a moment, Mutta was stunned. Then, he answered honestly, admitting that he was indeed afraid of dying. But his fear wasn't for himself. It was the fear of breaking his promise to Hibito. If death were to come, Mutta vowed to fight with every ounce of strength to stay alive. Tadashi, moved by Mutta's sincerity, remarked that his answer reminded him of Hibito's interview years ago. Apparently, the two brothers had expressed the same sentiment. As a result, Tadashi expressed his hope that Mutta and Hibito would one day fulfill their shared dream together. After the interview, Mutta ran to celebrate his success, to chase after Hibito, and to hold on to the hope that his brother was still alive. Mutta prayed that Hibito hadn't broken their promise, that he was still out there, fighting to survive. Mutta had come so far, chasing Hibito to this point, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing him now. At that moment, Mutta hoped with all his heart that Hibito would hold on, so they could fulfill the dream they had nurtured since childhood. Unexpectedly, Mutta's hopes and prayers seemed to reach Hibito. A light appeared before his eyes, and he heard Mutta's voice. It was a voice urging him to stay alive, to keep fighting, and to remember the promise they had made. With the last of his strength, Hibito forced himself to rise. Memories of their childhood, their shared dreams, and the promise they had made to each other became his strength. They fueled his determination to survive, so that the dream they had once imagined could become a reality. A year passed. Now, Mutta had achieved his goal of becoming an astronaut, bringing pride to his nation. He was set to become the second Japanese person to set foot on the moon, joining Hibito. Together, the two had turned their childhood dream into reality. They had proven that what once seemed like a far-fetched fantasy could indeed come true. All the ridicule, doubt, and scorn they had faced from others were now silenced. As the Japanese flag stood as a witness, Mutta and Hibito fulfilled their dream and kept their promise to each other on the moon. The end. Moral lesson from the story: if you can't find a job, just wait for your brother to call from NASA. Family connections are like rockets. They can blast you to the moon. But don't forget, even if you're afraid of failure, your childhood UFO sighting might still save your career.